Welcome. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a sleep consultant at Helping Babies Sleep, and welcome to our Tuesday live show. And I'm super excited to have Jenny Gal here today. She is a sex and intimacy coach. And together we're going to be talking about co-sleeping with kids and romance. Can they really coincide? But first, let me take a minute and really dive into Gal's diverse experience. So Gal is a somatic sexologist, erotic blueprints coach, an Ayurvedic postpartum doula, a pregnancy massage instructor, an advocate, an anthropologist, and a single mother. Her company, Venus Noir, helps expecting entrepreneurs who are simultaneously growing an empire alongside growing a family with sophisticated support systems that assist with all aspects of their lives postpartum. She and her team are working on a micro and macro level to facilitate massive social political change for the mother and child in North America. And Gal, so glad to have you here today. And where do we find you today?
I live in the high desert, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So great to have you here. So let's dive right in and talk about co-sleeping. So why don't we start with you kind of sharing your perspective on co-sleeping, and then I'll share my perspective and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, my perspective on co-sleeping and really any and every topic related to parenthood is that there's not necessarily like the right way to do any of it, right? It's like we are doing our very, very best to resource ourselves, to resource our families, to resource our children. And as we all know, they didn't come with a manual, right? So it's a lot of trial and error. My personal experience, I'm a mother of 3, and for me, it was a very personal choice to co-sleep with my children. And I define co-sleeping as, not just in the room or in proximity to me, but in bed with me. And for me, that worked. It worked for the reasons of really solidifying and securing a bonding, because I simply desired them in their little bodies right next to me. I wanted to be accessible to them. And I wanted to sync my heart rate to theirs. I wanted to regulate their nervous system with mine. I certainly didn't want to set a timer and get up and leave my bed in the middle of the night for, nightly feedings or any of that. So there was quite a few reasons why I chose to co-sleep and why it worked for me. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really wanted to co-sleep actually at the beginning. We started out co-sleeping, but there was that night where I heard him crying for a feed and I couldn't find him in the bed sheets. That sent me into a panic. And at that point, I knew that this was no longer for us. So I agree that I think there's more than one way to raise your family, and you really do have to figure out what works for you. And it really is a journey in doing so. But it just didn't work for us. My kids are older now, and we definitely do co-sleep every now and again, because I do think there is a wonderful sense of intimacy and connection, but we didn't do it before age 3 because I found it was just too hard for them to be able to come into bed some nights, but then not others. And then professionally, I'm a little bit biased in a lot of ways because I work with people who co-sleep more out of desperation than philosophy-wise, right? They found the only way they could get like a 4-hour stretch of sleep would be co-sleeping. So I'm biased in that I see more people who co-sleep kind of unsuccessfully, meaning that they wake up so many times at night, or they're held captive going to bed at 8 o'clock at night because the baby or the toddler needs them. But I'm biased because I see people who have trouble. If it works for you, awesome. And if it doesn't, I just want people to know that there's other options available to them as well. Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
On the flip side of that story, Sarah, had I known you when my children were in infant toddler stage, it would have been a game changer for me, because yes, there was benefits. Yes, that coincided with my philosophy of parenting, and yet I was reaching burnout. I wasn't getting great sleep. There was a lot of challenges in that decision because I wasn't properly resourced. You weren't around.
Right.
You weren't in my life but I think you would have made a huge difference for me.
Right. I hear that too. I completely understand that. Yeah. So let's kind of, dally into romance because I see a lot of parents come to me with toddlers in particular who are co-sleeping with, brewing resentment because, you know, the child has kind of stolen the bed. Usually often dad sleeps in another room completely and he would like his bed back. But now this child's so dependent on co-sleeping and often really nursing to sleep that it can be really hard. And the mother says to the father, I need you to do this because he's so attached to me. I can't even really be in the room with him. And the father's kind of like, ugh, you kind of created this scenario and now I'm responsible for fixing it. That being said, let's dive into like what we came here to talk about today with you and your expertise as a sex and intimacy coach. How can people avoid that situation and continue perhaps to co-sleep? And why is it important to put an effort into your sexual relationship with your spouse after kids?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, the first part of that question, the word and the designated place of the bed and the bedroom. There's a real opportunity to reframe and expand the location of where sex and intimacy can take place. And it doesn't have to just be in the bed or in the bedroom. There's, in couples who are facing this challenge really have an opportunity here in this transition, in this time, to transmute the challenge into expansion. Like how can we reframe what sex is, what intimacy is, where it takes place? Is there another area in the home that we can designate? Really starting to identify and explore your own needs, to explore your partner's needs. And, maybe it can be something as simple as, honey, I think tonight I would really, honey, this afternoon I washed all the bed sheets. I washed all of our linens. They're nice and clean. The space is ready for us. I know that baby is kind of designated in the bedroom right now, but I have set up a really juicy spot for us in the spare bedroom, in the downstairs den, whatever it may be. It's beautiful summer season. Maybe it's out in the backyard. Maybe it's out on the lawn.
Well, I like what you're planting there, though, the seed, because you think of it at being at the end of the day when everyone's getting into bed. And that's when women are the most depleted, right? You finally got people off of you. And the thought of one more person touching you might not be so appealing, but nap time might be a great time to dive into something like this. And I love the thought that when we spoke about this earlier, you mentioned when I asked you this question, you actually said, the bigger question is why is it important to identify and prioritize connection to yourself?
Right.
Which I thought was a really interesting response, right? So how do you think women view their sexuality, or how do you think it changes after kids, or in your experience, or what you see with your clients?
I think, how women view their own sexuality can be really through the lens of a lot of social conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of conditioning. And I think that so much comes up to the surface throughout pregnancy with so much attention to the reproductive system and these erogenous zones in our body. And in the healing process postpartum, there may be even more that's coming up around body shame, changes that have happened, physiologically as a result of pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And unfortunately, primarily here in North America, I'm seeing that there's a lot of conversation about like women getting back into their, normal gene size or pre-pregnancy like weight and all of these things. But there's a million things that are missed along the way in and really reclaiming full agency of your body, of yourself, your sexuality, and then how to navigate that kind of in a new embodied, empowered way. And
Mhm.
that's how I like to capture and work with clients postpartum.
And do you have any suggestions for, you mentioned having a daily self-care ritual that could nourish or kind of like get you in the mood? And do you feel like women in postpartum need more help getting in the mood?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that any body, any like nervous system, any like and so yeah, specific to postpartum, you've got hormones that are fluctuating. Likely there's some depletion and lack of sleep. There's a lot more happening in the system to titrate, to rest, to come into a place of rest and ease. And that's actually the only place um, that you can receive and be open to pleasure. You have to be in your parasympathetic rest, digest kind of state of being. So for women postpartum, like let's explore what that is. What is that? Maybe, as you mentioned in my intro, I'm an erotic blueprint coach. And so that body of work, there are 5 blueprints that each and every one of us kind of is dominant in. The energetic woman might really, really need, the calming and the spaciousness. Like she might really need space to feel safe, to feel relaxed, to reach that state. Maybe she needs to read for a little while. Maybe she needs to just rest for a little while, but she needs spaciousness. She might want crystals and rose quartz around her. She might want to do a tarot reading. Like there's these things that the energetic might really need to drop into parasympathetic. The sensual is going to need the stage set. They're going to need the ambiance. They're going to need essential oils like diffused in the air, and maybe silk or satin sheets. They're really going to want things to be in place. They're the artisans in the bedroom. The sexual is like, okay, baby's down for a nap. We've got 5 minutes. Let's just do this. Like, let's do this. This is what I need. The sexual needs sex and intimacy like food, like they need it. They can go from 0 to 60 and, instantly. And that is satisfying. They don't need the ambiance. They don't need the spaciousness. They don't need that. They just need connection. They need skin to skin contact. They need to have sex and they need it. And then there's kink and there's shapeshifter. These are some other areas. But, in working with these clients, we can determine like, what is it that brings you into a state of relaxation? How do you feel nurtured? How can we meet you there first as the very, very foundational level of creating this container?
If you have, a mom who's say 6, 7, 8 months postpartum, let's say, and still hasn't returned to intimacy with her spouse, what suggestions would you give that person to start traveling down that road? And why do you think it's important to do so?
Yeah, because, being connected and bonding with your significant other is a really important part of your health, and receiving and giving and being in, you are in a committed relationship. You did make a commitment. You are you are partnered. And so to honor that commitment, to honor, and it doesn't just have to be, penetrative sex. Again, there's an opportunity here to like reframe what sex and intimacy is. But I think what's really important is starting the conversation of, honey, I'm not exactly sure why why my drive is not there. Like that might be the thing. Like, I don't even know why my drive's not there. Or it might be a birth trauma. It could be like, I'm actually noticing that there's some fear in my body because I'm afraid that penetrative sex might even be painful for me. I'm afraid that maybe I haven't healed properly. Um, so, so again, really supporting women in finding voice to what their experience is, identifying that, and then bringing voice to that so that they can communicate that with their partner.
Communication is so important. And I feel the need just to chime in here as a public service announcement for anybody who feels like they're having painful intercourse after having birth to go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist, right? It really, we can think about giving birth as being very similar to a sports injury. Like you sprained your knee or your ankle, you're gonna, those ligaments got overstretched, which is what's happening in pregnancy. You are gonna go see a physical therapist to help you get on that healing, right? And if you don't, you may not have this, the healing might not happen in the way it's supposed to happen. So pelvic floor physiotherapy should be, mandated for every woman after their 6-week appointment with their OB. They should go see pelvic floor physiotherapy. So that's my public service announcement there. Okay. Well, thank you for these wonderful insights, Gal. I would just like to share, like, if you feel like you've been co-sleeping and it isn't serving you the way it used to, and you're ready to work on having an independent sleeper for your little person, and maybe that just means continuing to co-sleep without breastfeeding, or continue to co-sleep without a bottle, or maybe it's moving to a bed but continuing to feed. There's lots of different ways that this is possible, but the first thing that I would just work on is the timing of sleep. That's the most gentle and easiest way that you can make gains. So if you have a little person, say on one nap, let's say, that one nap in general for, let's say, a 2-year-old or older is usually about 6 to 6.5 hours from when they woke up for the day. Okay, so if they woke up at 6:30, that means naps happening around 1 to 3. And then most kids are usually asleep about 4.5, maybe 5 hours after that nap, which is usually 7:38. Okay, that gets you roughly 11 hours overnight in a 2-hour nap. That's very average for a 2-year-old. Okay, so that's the first place that you could work on. The second thing you could do to help your kiddo overcome co-sleeping is working on how your little person falls asleep at night, okay? Because often what I see happen is parents say, bedtime's no problem, I can nurse them and they fall right asleep. The problem really is, or give them a bottle, the problem really is then they continue to wake up in the night, okay? And working on timing of sleep can often just help that on its own. But then they try and teach something new in the middle of the night by not offering that bottle or that breastfeeding. It's too hard for your little person. They can't learn anything new in the middle of the night. So think about how your kiddo falls asleep at bedtime. That's what they're going to expect in the middle of the night. Okay. And then if you do have feeding issues, be it a bottle or a breast in the middle of the night, I want you to think about starting to work on a feeding window or a schedule during the day. Because if your little person can come up to you and ask for milk and get milk, either from a bottle or for a breast anytime during the day, well, of course, they're going to think they can do that anytime at night until you change that. So one simple way to work on things is starting to have more regular feeding times during the daytime rather than being on demand, so that you can implement that. That can transfer over to your nighttime as well. And it's not a complete shock to your little one that they've never been denied before, essentially. Okay. Gal, if people want to learn more and follow your work and get more of your valuable tips on sex and intimacy, where can they find you?
Sure. Well, I am on social media. I'm currently working on a website. I had some resistance to that, but that is in motion. I'm on Instagram. My company is Venus Noir. So on Instagram, my handle, I believe, is Venus_Noir 007. And on Facebook, it's Venus Noir. I'm also Jenny G Gal on Facebook.
Awesome.
So those would probably be the best spaces to find me in, and you're welcome to friend me or direct message me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, Gal. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and
Okay.
it's a beautiful topic to explore. So thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Sarah.
you.